Okay.
So yes,
Yeah,
I
there we go.
happy today, happy every day is a we're happy every day is a charity and we work on enlightenment and love. So
Okay.
I do teach at Fullerton. I'm on a break, but still doing a lot of charity work. I am teaching 6 classes out here. It's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
The best I ever did was 4 in one semester, but I did 8 classes a year for a very long time, and I can't even imagine how I lived. So, but yeah, I teach, I've taught women's sports history for more than 25 years. I started teaching it at George Washington University in 1996. And I've taught it at GW, Georgetown, American University, semester at sea, Santa Clara University, St. Mary's, Berkeley. And I feel like I'm leaving one out, but it's all been very terrific. And now some of the students I've taught are teaching a version of my class, a second generation, and about 3 different guys who are coaches and history teachers are teaching a women's sports history class based on what I do. One in Ohio, one in South Dakota, and I can't remember the third, but it's I get messages from them all the time, and it's just wonderful.
That's fantastic. And
Yeah,
thank you for sharing the syllabus with me. I figured
sure.
it was like it's one that you just kept adding to for over the years and then just changing and updating.
Yeah. In
I was
particular, as people get really interested in Olympic scandals or, the women's soccer demand for equal pay and how much attention that got, and the development of, women's basketball. Also, all of the scandals with the athletic trainer for women's gymnastics being revealed and convicted as an abuser. So there's always something, and depending on who enrolls, I might have football players, gymnasts, swimmers. I've had a lot of Olympic athletes. So, yeah.
You had the athletes in your class.
Yes, I had a woman who played Olympic water polo for Canada. I had 2 men recently who were Olympic swimmers, one from Sweden, one from Sudan. And I have a professional synchronized swimmer, a professional tennis player, and about half of the Georgetown men's football team before I left the East Coast, and now half the Berkeley football team are all enrolled. Yep.
That's fantastic. That is so amazing. I have had a women's professional soccer player, Rihanna
Mhm.
Sherrell. She's on our project too. She's from the Netherlands.
Ah,
She was one of my master's MBA students in California. And she's now helping traumatic brain injury people,
oh,
concussions.
wow, that's amazing.
She also talks to a lot of football players.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So you're making a film that's a documentary, or are you making like a feature film? What's your
I
plan?
I proposed it as a 90-minute feature, and then I was like, oh, who's gonna sit through 90 minutes because it's 2023. It was 2023, it was
Yeah.
24. And my students keep giving me feedback on some of the short videos that I make to even
Yeah.
make them shorter, and some of the long videos that I make to make them shorter,
Mhm.
and all that. So I'm thinking we're gonna have a bunch of sizzles, and I'd like some short comedy. I want to keep it on the comedy side because I think
Okay.
it's fun to talk about our period and sports and the actual evolution of us participating, females participating, I think had something to do with the tampon and things like that.
Hmm. Well, I can certainly recreate my confrontation with President Clinton because that's pretty funny,
That is pretty
and
funny.
that's a good success story. So,
is
You just let me
fantastic.
know how you would like to do this. You can ask me, and then I can uh, just do the scene, and it'll be like, 5 minutes. Or what would you prefer?
I can ask you. I'm gonna put a cue right here so that I know when in the video that we're gonna take
Okay.
action for it. So this will be my
Okay.
cue. So it'll be the Clinton one. C for Clinton. Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'm trying to get out of my shadow here, but it's okay. I guess I just gotta live with it. All right.
If
So
if it
C.
breaks up at all or anything, it's because I'm in the redwoods.
Okay. All right. So
So
let's
just let
try
me
it.
know. So far, everything's good.
Do you want me to
Okay.
call you professor or doctor?
My students call me Dr. Bond. That's probably good. That's
Okay.
also my email. Everybody knows me that way.
All right. Okay, so here we go. This is the final, this is where we're starting. All right. Happy today, happy every day. We have Dr. Bond here to share a story with us. Hi, Dr. Bond.
Hello, I'm delighted to be here, and I have a real success story that in women's sports from my start in becoming a professor of women's sports history. All
And
right.
I think it has to do with being at a game.
Oh, yes, it absolutely does. Yes, it certainly does. I'll tell you this. One of the things that has been distressing to me is that a really dynamic women's team can bring all kinds of glory to a school or a college, and yet nobody goes to those games. That is not true everywhere, and it's not true for every sport. It's thrilling to see that recently the University of Nebraska broke a record in packing the stadium for a women's volleyball tournament, and that's wonderful. But in my day, I began teaching at George Washington University in Washington, D.C., around 1994, so 30 years ago. And I was a new women's basketball fan. I had become very devoted to what I saw as a growing trend of without women playing football so much, women's basketball was really the sport where women were getting funding and attention if they got it at all. So I started going to as many games as I could, and I was sorry to see that other women's studies faculty were not on the bench next to me. Why was I the only one there? Where were these feminist advocates? So I kind of saw it as a cause, and I made sure that I had tickets for all the women's games. And I went to a game that was sort of a double header. The men were going to play, then the women were going to play. And you bought one ticket and you saw two games. And I was startled to have to walk through a metal detector. This was well before many of the security risks in the United States. So I asked a security guard why we were being stopped and searched. And he said, the president is here. President Clinton had brought his daughter Chelsea to a game, and she was about 14 at the time. The White House was just a few blocks down from the Smith Center, where our women's and men's basketball games played. So, very exciting. There was the president in a little box. And first, the men's team played. The men's team finished. The men leave the court. The women come onto the court, and President Clinton stood up and started to leave. And I thought, what is my job here? I can't not speak about this. And he was very accessible. So I sort of pushed my way through and stuck out my hand and said, hi, Mr. President. Listen, I'm a women's history professor here, and I'd really like to ask you to stay. Don't walk out on the women now that you've watched the men's game. The women actually have a better record than the men. Please show your support of them, show your support for Title IX law, and it would make a really good impression on your daughter and mean so much to our women athletes if you would just watch the women's game. And he said, well, I'd love to, but I have a meeting at the White House at 2 o'clock or something. I looked at my watch and said, okay, you can watch the first 15 minutes of the women's game. Please sit down. So I gave a direct order to the president of the United States. He went and sat back down. And he became the first US president to phone his congratulations to the winning women's team of the NCAA that year. I like to think I had a little something to do with that. So I don't know if I'd ever do this again, but filled with confidence, I submitted a proposal to my department chair. I'd like to develop a women's sports class. And it was called Athletics and Gender. So it was inclusive of everybody. But I have taught it every semester ever since, except the pandemic year, at campuses all over the US. And I have recreated that scene in several books. And I actually have had letters from readers saying, gosh, how could you possibly get up the nerve to confront the president that way? And I said, well, you can't walk out on half the population. Symbolically, this is where we are. We have dynamic young women playing their hearts out. And people in leadership need to show their respect. So it all worked out well for me. And I've had a lovely dynamic career teaching this class with students from all over the world and many star athletes. Probably the most dynamic is Alana Myers-Taylor, who went on to medal in bobsled at the Winter Games 3 times, and she became president of the Women's Sports Foundation, while also having 2 sons. I mean, she's incredible. Anyway, that's one story, and I try to do a lot of humor with my classroom work too. And I tell a lot of stories, and the students seem to be very happy. The classes keep selling out.
And I think it's your values, because what you value, it doesn't matter who the person is. We can't be like starstruck or intimidated, because when we have our values and our values are strong, we can go ahead and take action to raise awareness, to speak our values, to act our values, to live our values. So I'm really thankful that I found you to be a little bit part of sports history here.
I think it's very easy to do this work and be an advocate and also be friendly, cheerful, accessible. I think that there's an unjust stereotype that feminists have no sense of humor, and not in my family. Most of the stories that I bring to class are intended to relax students who might wonder, what's she going to be like? But they're also, maybe they've never taken a sports history class and they don't know how to write a paper or how to do well, I guess, is in a competitive world. So they're anxious to get an A, and I need to break the ice and say, a lot of this history is funny. It's ridiculous. The kind of dress codes girls had, the girls' rules, the, ban on dribbling, no talking, half court, those were the early rules for women's basketball. Having to wear the equivalent, of a missionary dress to swim 100 years ago. All of the ways that physical education classes restricted girls to, minimal activity, and the ways that equipment has been so second class. One story I tell in my book is I was attending a very highly ranked women's basketball game at Georgetown. It was a match between Georgetown women's basketball and the University of Connecticut. At that time, the top team in the country, and Diana Taurasi was there. And in the middle of the game, played in the old women's gym, McDonough Arena, the clock stopped. Okay. The scoreboard basically quit, and pieces were going boing, darn, coming off the wall. Everything had to stop while they tried to fix the clock and the score. And, the athletes got chilled, and had to walk around slapping themselves. It was winter. And behind me, I heard a father say, well, I can certainly see why the men uh, don't play here. And somebody else yelled out in frustration, what's the score? And I used that as my book title from that event. And of course, I go to games, although I'm very, religious about going to men's events. I do sit there with my journal and take notes. So I do write through some exciting plays, but I want to capture, what do I hear people saying around me, like this father? Another humorous thing I heard, there was a game I attended, probably at George Washington University, and they played a rival team, the Lady Rams.
Okay.
And a little girl said to her grandfather, I'm thinking, Grandpa, a lady can't be a ram. And I said, hey, kid, you sign up for my women's history class next semester. So there's dozens of teams around the country, because I've looked online, that use this, the Lady Bulls and whatever it is. And of course, the implication is you have a male team name that's strong and virile and masculine and practically reproductive. And the women are supposed to be this feminized version of that. So that's just insane. And one of the things that I also have found very funny, I suppose, in inviting people to share in their papers, or sometimes they do class journals, students have told me about all the ways that they've talked back to people who make fun of women athletes. And one young woman wrote about her frustration. She was dating a really nice guy, but she heard him make fun of her coach. And he said, boy, where does somebody get shoulders that big? And she turned to him and said, she's an Olympian, you idiot. I was very proud of her because, of course, what was going on in her mind was, whoa, are you looking at me and criticizing my body? You work out so that you can row your way to a gold medal. If you don't like that, what are you doing with me? So everybody confides over, once they're relaxed and they feel comfortable with me, they confide a great deal of material, and it would make 1,000 good movies. So some students have gone on to work in film, and they all write back to me. They write back to me when they're outraged. You'll never believe what happened. I thought we were past this. And many students have gifted me with team jerseys and pins, and I have a whole scrapbook of lovely letters and cards and stuff. So it's a very rewarding life. Now, I should go on record and say I am not a very good athlete. I sat on the couch reading while my brother was playing soccer and volleyball. I became more active as an adult, as a kind of an ice skater, rollerblader, hiking, biking type of person. And I found when I was employed at several East Coast schools that had ice hockey teams, that faculty could use the ice hockey arena on the lunch hour, and you could skate around. And I loved that. I loved doing free skating time, and I'd write my class lecture while I'm skating laps. Well, I was doing this at Northeastern University in Boston, and I was wearing an old sweatshirt and my brother's old shorts, and zipping around planning my classes. And in the middle of the ice is a woman in her old ice dancing outfit, probably from some past competition. And she's much older, and she's wearing this little fancy mini skirt and practicing routines of yesteryear to a recording. And I can see how beautiful and graceful she is. So we both get off the ice at the same time, and she looks at me in my old sweats and says, really, the whole point of ice is to look gracious and beautiful. And I thought, oh my God, whoa, sorry, my bad. And it mattered so much to her that I try harder to look feminine. And so there's those kinds of conversations from between different generations. But my experiences have mostly been as I get older, I'm often the only adult woman my age who's skating real fast or out in a big wave. Not here in California, the women surfers are far ahead of me. But say on the East Coast, there's a lot of women who are still afraid of the water. And another humorous moment was in my old neighborhood in Washington, D.C. Um, I lived near many embassies, and it was a very beautiful area with the road reasonably well kept. So they had just paved it, and I thought, yes, I'm going to go rollerblading around my neighborhood. And I'm not really the most skilled skater. I enjoyed being on this smooth street with parked cars I could grab onto. But anyway, I'm working out, and along comes this embassy limousine, clearly some dramatic nation, and a bulletproof shaded glass, and the window rolls down, and this woman's arm reaches out with this glove with diamond rings probably underneath, and she goes, "You are so brave." And then the window rolls back up. And I was like, I'm not so brave. Get some knee pads. Come on out. Skate with me. And then the car rolled off and I never saw her again. So who knows? The wife of an ambassador. So I try to encourage older women and younger women to be brave and truthful. And I'm pretty transparent on the first day of class, and I'll say I'm not a award-winning athlete. I'm an award-winning writer and a historian, and I'll help guide you to write about your life as an athlete. And let's go. So
That's
it's been a very
fantastic.
good trip. Yeah.
So Rihanna Sherrill has actually written, I think she's on her third book, Move the Brain, and Life with My Concussion was her first one. And she takes women through a journey of how it's like to be a college, a childhood athlete, a college athlete, and then a professional soccer player. Mind you, I
Hmm.
just said professional soccer player. That is one thing that we
Yeah.
do with sports herstory is just say she's a professional soccer player.
Yeah.
Anna Sherrill's a professional soccer player. We don't have to say the word women's in front because that's just one of
Yeah.
the things
Right.
that we need to
Exactly.
get into that. Now, in 1900, coincidentally, the Olympics were in Paris, France, and there were 22 women, which was 2% of the whole Olympic who participated. And I'm
Hmm.
on this mental, just this hunch, this feeling that it's just because only 22 of us females wanted to participate. And now it's 124 years later, and more of us want to participate now. But what you're saying and the roadblocks that were put on us
Oh, yeah.
matter, but we wanted it bad enough, and that's why we're doing it. Because it wasn't anybody stopping us. It's just we really now wanted it. And now we have 50%, it's about 50% in Paris 2024 of female
Well,
male.
but
Which
there were
is
people.
fantastic.
There were people stopping us. There were women who wanted to go who weren't allowed. Women weren't allowed, from the U.S. For a very long time. Women didn't really compete in a large number from the United States till the 1928 Olympics. And because of a 800 race where the women were exhausted after breaking records and laid down on the lawn, onlookers were shocked. They thought the women had passed out. And the Olympics banned the 800 meter until like the 1980s. Women weren't allowed to do marathon. They were only allowed to do pole vaults, ice hockey, and ski jump within the last 20 years. And all of that, definitely because women petition and complain. At the high school level, a lot of women, were not permitted to do any of the activities that would get them a college scholarship, and colleges didn't offer scholarships to women. So there's still a lot of problems. But it's true that if you present opportunity, women will show up, and the increase is just fantastic. It's like at least 3,000 to 5,000% increase since Title IX was passed 52 years ago. And that anniversary has been a great celebration of where we are now.
Well, 52 years is not that long ago. And I was fortunate standing at 5'5" 5 3/4" to be official. And I earned a volleyball scholarship for Division 1. I ended up choosing to play Division 2 because that was about the time when the taller girls were taking over the sport. So, but I was blessed, and this was in 1996. So I
Where did you play?
I got recruited to play at Armstrong Atlantic State University. I went in for a criminal justice program, and I got a volleyball scholarship. And we had our middle hitter from Cologne, Germany, and then we had women from all over America, and it was amazing. But that was the first time I didn't like volleyball because I started playing for money. And when I would get hurt, my coach would just tape me up and I'd have to go back in. But on the bright
Yeah,
side,
my brother's a volleyball coach. I come from a volleyball family. I'm not a
yeah.
volleyball player, but my father coached my and played. My brother is a coach at a girls' high school in Mammoth Lakes, and he is the coach of a club team. They've done very well, and boy, do I know volleyball, stories and humor, and I think that's terrific. I have always found that the volleyball women in my classes are very smart and decent and nice. I mean, everyone brings whatever qualities, but of course, I have a bias because of my family's involvement with volleyball.
Well, so when I met Rihanna, who's a women's professional soccer player, I had this enlightening moment because my mom's like, no, you can't play soccer. Soccer's for boys, so play volleyball. And I honestly thought I really could have been a contender if I played soccer. And I was like, I could have really been a contender because then we went pro, because I would have been the generation of the first round going pro, like
Hmm.
Hams. And then when I met Rihanna and she got a concussion and all this happened, and I said, you know what, I'm pretty accident prone, so maybe it's good that I didn't play soccer. And I did volleyball. And it was
Well,
just
this is part of the predicament, which is that we're still a society that worries about women getting hurt. Or are we? We have not effectively eliminated, sexual assault and domestic violence, but we worry about, women getting hurt if they play soccer. So there's a little mixed message there. And the other thing is that we're very willing for young boys to get traumatic brain injury and
right.
do pee-wee football. What I teach in my class is it's very interesting that public awareness about domestic violence became more vocal just at the time that women were able to do more athletic training. So uh, we have greater public awareness to be concerned when we see a woman with a bruise on her face. But now that woman could be a boxer. She could be a wrestler. She could be a professional soccer players. So we flinch at the sight of an injured woman for a number of reasons, but it's also going to be part of elite training. And we also have a diet culture that's very, hostile and manipulative to women, with the result being very poor body image for so many younger women. And so building yourself up to be muscular and large, there are a lot of mixed feelings about that, and we need to cheer on the big women. Um, and I think one of the most interesting conversations I have in class is how we stereotype how much food men are supposed to eat and how much women are supposed to eat. But what if you've just done an Olympic workout? You're hungry. So we look at the way sports food is marketed to men and diet food is marketed to women. We also look at toys and all the humor about girls' toys being pink or women really wanting, a football and instead getting a toy stove. Um, there was a year when I really wanted a competitive yo-yo, a Duncan Imperial competitive professional yo-yo, and instead I got a little change purse, and I was like, oh, I got a girly thing, but the interesting thing is now you have so many terrific sports writers who are women who have been modeling as well careers in sports journalism, in being a referee, in coaching men, being in the, anchor, the box or whatever, doing sports casting. And we have a lot of women who are doing a very moral job in looking at where athletic clothes are made, and are they made by children at slave wages? Who is making our sports gear? Who's making our soccer balls? And you have people like, Julie Foudy, who traveled to Pakistan to see our soccer balls being made by, children and sweatshops. And I think women have really raised the game in a moral direction.
I think it's our sense and sensitivity. Females are more sensitive to the frequencies and things. So I do teach business ethics. I don't know if I told you that. And this topic is actually one of them. And I was explaining to my students how company A could just call somebody and ask for a letter that says, yes, we promise we don't do child labor. And then that letter is enough. It's not enough. You do have
No.
to go there and look down your supply chain, what's going on, right?
Well, when I
Kudos
worked
to the
on
woman who did it.
when I worked on a semester at sea, which is a university ship that goes around the world and it takes college students and faculty, we had the opportunity to go into several Nike factories in Vietnam and South Korea and so forth. And when they found out that I taught this class on women's sports, they told me I was not welcome to tour the factory. So I paid one of my own students $10 and gave him my camera and said, here, just take the pictures for me. And one thing that we talk about in class is what is the measure of success? And for a lot of athletes, it's having a shoe named after you, which is great, but who's making them, And so when women want to reach the success that men enjoy in having a line of sportswear with their name on it, that's nice, but to what degree are you involved in, the whole production campaign? So all of that is a part of the class that I have taught for all these years. And, we look at just about every angle. In some classes, I've had students be really shocked that they've been an athlete their whole life and they didn't know anything about the women who went before them. They didn't know about racial segregation in American sports history. And we were able to laugh at some of these things. But in Alabama, during Jim Crow racial segregation, it was against the law for a Black person and a white person to play a game of checkers on a public street. That's how strict. So even the smallest games, ponds, lakes, beaches, all segregated. So water was segregated. And then water has also been gendered. You have the women's swimming pool and the men's, or women's swimming hours and men's. You can't mix. And this is all great material for writing interviews, films, songs, and it's all part of making, I think, American history or world history meaningful and real and honest.
So are we going to change it to Herstory or are we going to keep it history?
Ah, Well, I use both, and
Good.
um, the main thing that I think is challenging for my students when they're writing about the past is just remembering when were newspapers invented? When did radio begin? When did film begin? When did TV begin? And then we get to computers and email and smartphones. And the point of all that is that it was you were either at a game or you read about it in the paper, but you couldn't watch it after it happened the way you can now with video. And we lost some of the great moments of women athletes that who were the breakthrough champions. Now we've been able to archive female achievement with modern media. But the All American Girls Baseball League that played during World War II, there's a few films of them, but certainly not enough. And as they were so popular and successful, the post war era brought us television in many homes, and people could relax at home and watch a men's game for free rather than go out and pay to watch a women's game. And that's part of why the league folded. So TV both brings us more women's performances, but it also has kept a lot of people from going out to a live event. And live events are very expensive. So, what we need to push now is to make sure that women's events are televised as much as men's. You can't have it all on the super expensive cable subscription channel. Put the women's games on, evening TV and get families watching them.
We've had
That's my little lecture.
with USA Yoga. USA Yoga is in its 25th year, and it's helped me continue to be a professional athlete even at my age, because I'm not playing volleyball anymore. However, I can compete in yoga. So
Wow.
we put it on YouTube and we stream it. And we had our last year when we had our qualifiers in Florida, she had the banners and all that stuff going. It's a lot of production, and like we're actually trying to do it ourselves. So it's amazing because the stuff that they do with yoga, let's just find a production team and then put it on ESPN for a minute, because it's pretty fantastic. And and that's actually a sport where the females are dominating. And I actually registered to compete in the men's division this year because they didn't have their paperwork organized between male, female. They called it women's, men's. And if I'm Dr. Papadopoulos, I'm not a Ms. or a Mrs.
Yeah.
So, but then there was some other mix up in the registration, and I ended up in the women's. I would have got second place if I was in the men's, but I got fifth in the women's.
I just started taking yoga. I took it when I was young, about 11, and I just started again. It's just wonderful. I look forward to it so much. I feel more limber, and I try to walk about 3 miles a day. During the COVID year, I walked on every beach, every deserted cove, got to know the California coast very well. And, one of the things that I hope to do when I am older, if I move back to the East Coast, I will return to working out on ice skates because I really enjoy that. And, I'll wear whatever I want.
And you better be graceful. You better
And pretty. I know, right?
So yeah, yoga is gymnastics though for women.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where because for the men, they didn't have the beam. So like there's stuff going on both ways. But
Yes.
I just want to bring in the period part, because as female athletes, I know if I look at the statistics and I pull at the evolution of the tampon technology, pads, all that stuff, I think that matters, because if I'm competing that day, I don't know if my cycle is going to be there or not. When I played volleyball, we ended up having our period all around the same time. And I'm sure other athletes have told you this, that on their team, they get their period and it's around the same time.
Absolutely. Sure.
But as a yoga athlete, I'm practicing by myself and my cycle is my own. But come nationals competition day, we have to wear a leotard.
Right. And I think one of the biggest changes in the past 2 years has been a whole variety of women's international teams and Olympic teams have refused to wear white uniforms, and they've done away with that. And they've been very outspoken that this makes women so self-conscious. It's just not necessary. There's been a lot of attention to women running marathons who start bleeding while they're running. There was a great deal of journalism about one of my former students from Georgetown, Kiran Gandhi, and she made headlines running with her period and did a lot of interviews. So she's in a rock band now in Los
Oh, awesome.
Angeles. And I think a lot of the fear of women's difference and women's bodies is behind the restrictions. And instead, we just need to flip it to women's natural strength. I used to have a pin that said, I am woman, I can bleed for days and not die.
Die, heck yeah.
um, and that magical quality. But I also think that there's pressure on women that at the same moment you're supposedly peaking as a physical competitor, you're in your, childbearing
Prime
years, and you
childbearing years.
take
Yeah.
time out and have a child, and then people wonder if you'll both, lose time or strength or be injured by your own, motherhood.
No, my
Um,
coach told me that we get
mm,
better after the kid, after and I think it's true. I think that you can have a more athletic and be more competitive
mm.
even after if you have the kid at 28 or 35. I think I don't even know what is considered childbearing years. It's probably like 18 to 38.
Well,
But
one
I'm
of the
still
great
going
historical
strong.
mysteries, yeah, in the plague era, more women survived the plague, and more men died. And I had dinner with a surgeon on a cruise, and who told me that it might have had to do with the iron levels of women in childbearing years. But whatever, women have had strength in times of crisis, where in this instance, a literal plague hit men harder. Um, I think that the fact that we're all living longer is also a big part of this story, because it means that women and men can compete longer, and women are active and competitive long after they've had children or raised children, and not all women have children. So the question now is to create or sustain spaces for older women to work out
Mhm.
and to be supportive of older women's teams and older women's achievement and the sight of an older woman dunking or whatever it is. And we now have a critical mass of star female athletes from the past 50 years, who were in their 70s and 80s, and they should be doing more interviews and coaching clinics and workshops. It's a pleasure to see some of the tributes to women coaches on the ESPN or whatever. But we could always have more.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I just wanted to bring the fun of the period out just because we don't talk about it. And I think it's fun. And I had to deal with it, and others have to deal with it. And yes, Rihanna's talking about concussions, and that's kind of a real thing, but bleeding is a real thing too. And with athletics, you could be the best, but you're really not the best. On competition day, the team that is the best that day is the best.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
I'm
why.
going to tell I'm going to tell you a joke on camera that you can use in this film. Okay.
Okay.
So here's a fun joke that I learned when I was about 14, 15. Two little boys, they're bored. They want to do something fun, but they only have about, $3 between them. And they're arguing, how can they take, $3 and do something fun? Can they all go bowling? No. Can they all, go to another kind of event like a movie? No. And then one of the little boys says, I know, let's buy a box of tampons. And the other little boys go, "Are you crazy? What would that do?" And the first little boy says, "Haven't you ever read the side of the package? It says if you have this, you can go swimming, water skiing, dancing, ice skating, running." There you go. I think that's a great joke.
That is fantastic. That is fantastic. That is fantastic.
See,
Yeah,
one of the things that's well, in American society, one of the complicated things is that girls are getting their periods younger and
younger,
younger.
younger,
And
yeah.
some people would say it's because of all of the hormone in our food or our hamburgers, whatever. But the fact is that it used to be, even when I was, in junior high, there were girls who were 14 or even 15 who were just starting their first period. And now it's like 9 or 10. So you had longer tomboy time, or
Yeah.
you had almost 5 years more of your parents not worrying about you getting pregnant or people leaving you alone in that way. And to lose that amount of time is a big deal in a lot of girls' lives. And also, it has forced us to have the discussion of sex education younger and younger, and schools are very uncomfortable. So, those are all, big changes. But yeah, I think having humor about it is very important.
So I remember my women's studies class in undergrad early, in the late 90s or early 2000s. And I lost my train of thought. Oh,
Did you?
no, the hypothalamus
Oh,
regulates when the period happens and the percent body fat. So,
mm-hmm.
so it could be another thing could be, because this is what I learned from women's studies back then. I can't believe I remember it, but because if the female's percent body fat, if the kids are getting fatter,
Mm-hmm.
then they could also be getting their period younger because of
That's
that.
right. Yes. Yeah. And also the body responds uh, from the ancient recognition. You have enough body fat to last through a famine. You're ready to give birth and to nurse an infant.
Mhm.
In short, the body responds. You're safe. This is a time of feast and not famine. And so your fertility, is protected, all of those things.
I
So,
remember two things. Go ahead.
yeah,
Sorry.
I was going to ask, did you grow up in Greece?
Connecticut, ma'am.
In Connecticut, ma'am? Okay.
Connecticut.
Because of the
I
Olymp,
was born and raised in Connecticut.
but the Olympic legacy.
I'm still
I
Greek. My parents are American citizens, but they came from Greece. But I was born in
okay.
Connecticut, the Constitution state, and I love Connecticut, and that's why I was cheering for UConn.
I know exactly. I just feel like it's always a pleasure when somebody who's interested in sports has an actual bloodline going back to the first Olympics. So
Yes, the
wear that with
Olympics,
pride.
and the women actually didn't participate then
I
in the
know.
first ones. And I'm not going that far in history because I think 1900s Paris is a good start for now. And I'm not having a lot of footage. I'm finding pictures here and there, but like you said, there's no footage. So I have to go with stories and things. And then I remember you touching on a point earlier, and this is from my first women's studies class when I did a project where the cereal box would say
Oh
enlarged
yeah.
to show texture, right? So my project was, why does the cereal box say enlarged to show texture, but all these magazines don't say photoshopped?
Right.
Uh,
And it took a long time to get women on the Wheaties box. Here's another amusing thing. When I was a kid, I thought that only boys could eat Wheaties because the television commercial jingle was "He knows he's a man when he's ready for Wheaties." And I
mhm.
thought it was illegal for a girl to buy and eat a box of Wheaties. And there wasn't any cereal or food that said you're a woman now and you're ready, for you know the big size chocolate bar, anything like that. And then suddenly women were on the Wheaties box after the women's World Cup victory and the women's 1998 ice hockey medal. And then we had Stacy Dragila from pole vault from the Sydney Olympics. And now it's very normal. But those are just some subtle changes in grocery store history that honor women athletes.
I
So,
think it was Mary Lou
yeah,
Retton.
Mary Lou Retton. Yep. Oh
And
my
then
God.
I remember Mary Lou Retton.
Hmm.
And then I remember the Wheaties.
Well, there's a lot of humor with sports food. I mean, a Cliff
Oh,
Bar and a Luna Bar, the same thing. It's just one has a moon on it, so that's how you know it's feminine.
so it's funny that you mentioned you didn't think it was legal for you to go to buy the Wheaties. So I worked at a place called the Women's Fitness Edge in Westport, Connecticut, when I was
Uh,
in the master's program. The Women's Fitness Edge. Now, we called it the Women's Fitness Edge, but by law, we weren't allowed to not let men join. However,
of
because we
course.
called it the Women's Fitness Edge, the women came to work out there.
Yeah. There's always some guy who wants to come into women's space, but um, I in a lot of places in the beginning of my career, I was the only woman in a department, full of guys. Certainly at Harvard, I was asked, what I was doing in the faculty lounge, and I said, well, I'm faculty. And then the man who questioned me said, oh, you're too young and pretty. I didn't think you were, I'm like, what are you saying? That to be a female intellectual, you're an ugly old hag? Thanks. So it was those kinds of conversations that motivated me to do a one-woman play about the backlash against women in academia and women's studies, and that was a lot of fun.
Oh, I want to
Uh,
see it. Is it recorded?
uh, yes, it's a book, Revenge of the Women's Studies
I saw
Professor.
that. I saw that.
It's one
Okay.
of my books. You can get that online for $1 or 2.80, whatever.
Fantastic. I want to actually see you. I thought I was going to see you act it out.
I have done it. For 15 years I traveled around and I did it as a fundraiser at battered women's shelters. I went to women's studies programs in Iceland, Ireland, New Zealand, Canada, India. A lot of feminist conferences, and it was a lot of fun. Really a good time. It was especially wonderful in Iceland. I gave a speech in Icelandic to welcome the women. Of course, everyone spoke English. I was so embarrassed. But I said, talk fyrir kurmina kvinna and the slack to the falak, which is welcome. Thank you for coming. You're just so beautiful. And yeah, so I kind of stopped after a while, but I could certainly do it again. It's a little dated now, but I could bring it up to speed. And in fact, I think a lot of people would be interested.
Yeah, it fantastic. Like bringing stuff. I have a song that I
Hmm.
might have produced in the early 2000s that was on a record label that the lyrics are a little bit on the interesting side. They promote abstinence, so you can understand where the song kind of goes. But I'm trying to re-record it and take some of the stuff that the male producer put in, because the male producer added stuff that I didn't really like even back then, but back then it was the thing sex sells, so I was like, okay,
Uh,
let's make some money. Okay, but now I'm kind of like, no, I want to take that out because I wrote a
mhm.
poem and it turned into a song. So my creative stuff is here, and I'm back. I'm doing this movie. Finally, I'm doing my own movie. I worked on many movies, but this is my jam,
Yeah, yeah.
and I'm really happy that you're here and we can record more again. The audio person joined us. His name is Ken. He's Barbie's Ken. We're borrowing him from Barbie. He's our main audio person on the project. So we're going to see how we sound and we look on this, and then
Okay.
see what clips we want to take.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm good. I'm
And
gonna.
I think
I
that was
have, a complicated teaching schedule, but I can work around it. So this is very good.
Yeah, I'm really happy. Sports Herstory, we did approach some tampon people to see if they wanted to work with us. We're just gonna do it with our own stuff, with Rihanna
Okay.
Sherrill, you, me. Um, I have Christina Robbins, she's from Colorado, and then another gentleman who did sociology. Uh, Coakley is his name. We're gonna talk to him too. He did some female sports stuff. I don't know if you've heard of him, Coakley. We'll all connect. We'll have a party.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you
All
for your
right.
time today.
Yeah,
Happy
I have to
Friday.
go and help my mom make dinner now, but I am very happy. Um, and I will talk to you again soon.
Thank you. Happy today. Happy every day.
Okay. You too. This is fabulous. Fabulous. Evaristo.
Namaste para Carlo.
Okay. Bye.